Hello and welcome to Park Carrick Ducks. Today I'm going to give you a very simple overview of how to feed ducks correctly. We don't want to overcomplicate things, but there are three primary differences between feeding ducks and feeding chickens, and I'm going to cover those today because they're quite important. So both ducks and chickens are going to need a very similar pelleted kind of feed that looks a lot like this feed. You can see that. And it basically consists of soya for protein and wheat as a carbohydrate source, as well as various vitamins and minerals that are in there. So the number one thing you need to know about feeding ducks compared to feeding chickens is that chicken feed, conventional chicken feed, comes with certain antibiotics as standard that they put in that feed, but those medications don't respond well with ducks. So you want to avoid using conventional chicken feed when you're feeding your ducks. The best way and the simplest way to do this is, unless you have access to a waterfowl specific feed locally, in which case this video probably doesn't matter to you, then you want to go for an organic chicken food, because those organic ones will not have those antibiotics as standard in them. Obviously, if you have access to waterfowl feed, go for that, but failing that, you want to be using organic chicken feed, which is unmedicated. The second thing you need to know about ducks is generally they have a much higher protein requirement than chickens. So if you have laying ducks, for example, or laying hens, chickens will tend to have a feed of around 17.5% protein. With ducks, although they'll manage with that, ideally you could take them up to 19 to 20% protein even when they're adults. Now, often people use that level of protein when they're raising young birds, because they have higher protein requirements, and so a standard chicken grower pellet will have something like 19.5 to 20% protein in it. You could use that grower's pellet as your standard feed for ducks, and they would appreciate that extra protein. Now, if you do use a grower's pellet for laying ducks, then of course that grower's pellet has higher protein, but it won't have the additional calcium that comes with a pellet that's been designed for layers. In which case, just supplement with oyster shell and they'll be fine. So in an ideal world, you'd be feeding a duck you'd be feeding them organic feed, which is a grower's pellet, so high in protein, and then supplementing them with oyster shell. And then the third point that you need to know is that chicken feed doesn't have enough niacin. It doesn't have as much as ducks require. So what you need to be doing is supplementing their diet with some additional niacin. And the way we do that is quite simply to buy a bit of brewer's yeast. And again, you don't have to overcomplicate it. It's not an exact science, or at least, you know, there's not much information there on exactly how much brewer's yeast you need to be giving them. But we just know that you get great results if you just every now and then top up their feed with 1 or 2 cups of brewer's yeast. That's the brand that we use. We purchase it on Amazon, and you know, let's say if I put out a 20 kilo sack of feed in one of the feeders, there's some little plastic cups about this big that come in this tub, and I'll put 2 or 3 of those and stir that in with the feed. The other thing that you can do is put one of those cups into their water every now and then and mix it into the water. And obviously we'll do a separate video on feeding ducklings, because that is different. But ducklings do have a much higher requirement for niacin, so you want to definitely be using a lot more brewer's yeast with ducklings. But for adult ducks, just every now and then a bit of brewer's yeast is what you need. So to summarize, if you don't have access to a waterfowl specific feed, go for an organic chicken feed. Ideally, it's going to be a grower's feed that is high in protein. Make sure that you supplement with niacin or brewer's yeast, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, your ducks are going to love as many worms and slugs as you can throw at them. So give them lots of access to your garden and they'll be really happy with you. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions in relation to feeding ducks, please do leave them in the comment section below and we will do our best to get back to you. Thanks. Until next time.